Hello and welcome to Time is an Ingredient, sponsored by Gulf Photonics, makers of the AccuBrew fermentation monitoring system. Time is an Ingredient is a podcast for brewery professionals and breweries in planning, but we also hope that consumers take something away with them about how tough it is to put a great beer in a glass. Today's episode is Hop Time at Tampa Bay Brewing Company with Anthony Stone, Director of Operations. I forget your title.
Yeah, head brewer, Director of Brewing Operations. Yeah. I wear a lot of hats. Yeah.
And they're a very Tampa Bay Brewing Company. I'm sure everybody's aware, but it's a very, very hop centric. But they also make an incredible Moose Killer barley wine, and they've got the pastry series that they did. And there was a Goza you guys did that was amazing. So, first of all, Anthony's from the Northwest. Tell us about that.
All right. I'm originally from Bellingham, Washington, north of Seattle. So when I started brewing, I started home brewing in 2001. So I did the math. Next year I've been brewing half my life, which is kind of fun. But I was framing houses, and I got into professional brewing kind of on a dare. My friends were telling me how good my beer was and I should be a brewer, and I didn't think you could. So I brought my beer to the local brewery, and they hired me. The next week I was washing kegs and doing transfers, and over that time we grew to be the largest brew pub in the country for a while.
And what's the name of that?
Boundary Bay.
Boundary Bay.
Yeah,
Are they still active?
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, still talk with them. I sent them some beer the other week.
Cool.
Great guys. Now there's 10 or 11 breweries back home. And then I won a scholarship with the Glenn Hay Falconer Foundation to the American Brewers Guild. And then after that I went to Deschutes Brewing in Bend for 4.5 years before I came out here to Florida. And I've been at TBBC for about 4 years.
Right.
And when I first moved here, I was at another brewery for a little bit. What really attracted me to Tampa Bay Brewing Company, I remember when I walked in the first time, and there's loud music playing, and it's a family-owned business, which every brewery I've been at, it's been like a family-owned brewery. Right. One thing I really noticed different about Florida is the water is really different for brewing than other places I've been. So TBC had water treatment, had a lab, really important for consistency and quality. So I didn't get a job there till after about a year in Florida, but I've been there, I think it's my 4th year now or something.
So that was about the time Hop Silo Series started.
I came on board with Hop Silo 8.
8.
Yeah, I wasn't really involved with the recipe on that, but
right.
Yeah.
But because that's what I really wanted to talk to Anthony about, because I was still working behind a bar, and I've had all of them, and they just kept blowing my mind, because I'm a big West Coast IPA person, and Anthony really wanted to talk about West Coast. And so I always think, of course, Pliny the Elder, and then I like Double Mountain, and a bunch I can't remember. I always try to think, who did Triceratops?
It's Ninkasi.
Ninkasi.
Yeah, Jamie.
Yeah. And then there was, what is it, Boneyard?
Yeah, Boneyard. RPM.
Yeah. So there's like all these amazing breweries up there. So when you think of West Coast, coming from the West Coast, what do you say to us that everybody's like over here is like
right.
That?
Well, it was funny coming over here from the West Coast, and people would talk about West Coast IPA, and I quickly saw there's kind of like two different schools. So you have the more kind of what I would call more traditional American IPA. So when I first got into the industry, I was constantly having to explain to people what an ESB was, what's an IPA. A lot of people, the IPAs were just way too bitter. And I was definitely there for the whole IBU arms race. And everyone's
Stone.
IPA were getting higher ABV, higher IBU, just more and more citrus. The hop varieties available were like Cascade, Centennial, Amarillo, Simcoe hit the scene. It's and then it hit like an overload where people were like, hey, give me a session IPA, or kind of start toning it down. And because at that time, I think, because the people going from Ice Light Dry Draft to drinking craft beer for the first time, IPAs were like overwhelmingly bitter to them.
Yeah.
So you had to have like a strong, balanced malt profile to kind of balance out the bitterness, right? It was brewers down in California, I think, started making these really bone dry IPAs that are much more hop forward. So when you think about a West Coast IPA, it can kind of mean two different things. And I've seen people recently online kind of calling those more old school West Coast, like a Pacific Northwest IPA. That's not like an official designation. It's something I've heard in the chatter.
Sure.
At Tampa Bay Brewing Company, we've been around 25 years. We have Old Elephant Foot, which we've been making for a long time, and it's that more traditional American IPA. It's balanced, smooth, malty. It's Centennial, Cascade, just a kiss of Mosaic.
Yeah, and this was probably, if it's the same as my refrigerator, it was probably like canned like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, or a week ago. So wherever you find it, it's ready.
We've done a lot of stuff to improve the quality of that beer since I came on board. We used to buy spot hops.
That's now that's interesting to me because I know when you're in distribution, there's a whole lot of people trying to stop you from changing a beer. So maybe you guys haven't felt that pressure as much. I don't know, but
the whole distribution discussion, that's a whole nother talk.
Of course. I don't want to get into that, but
there's a lot of competition out there.
And I do know that what you want to make and what you can make aren't always the same thing because what you can get.
Okay.
So is that what happened there?
Well, no. Another thing I'd say also makes those older, more traditional, however you want to put it, IPAs. They have some crystal malt, a little more color. We were just buying spot hops, and now I started contracting and selecting. So the quality of our Cascade and Centennial dramatically increased.
Okay.
We've increased the dry hopping rate a bit. That beer's changed over the years. But it's been pretty, really, in a production brewery, my goal is consistency and quality.
I can't say I've tasted a huge difference, but,
Yeah, just little tweaks, but we noticed, as far as the hops we're selecting, what a big difference it is. This week we're releasing a new West Coast IPA called Coralhead, and this is more modern West Coast IPA. It's no crystal malt. It's just, a bit of wheat and Pilsner and Pale. It's really, light-bodied, kind of dry, very hop forward, and we're really moving away from that pine, citrus profile. It's really, it's got a little Centennial in the kettle, some Citra in the Whirlpool, and then Strata, El Dorado in the dry hop. So we're really excited about making a core beer with Strata. It's got a new modern hop. So it's a little bit of dank, but we're kind of going more with other fruit forward hops. Citra's is plain in there in the Whirlpool, but I think what really stands out in the dry hop is the Strata and the El Dorado.
Okay.
So we've been working on this for a while, and we're really exciid to release it.
Let's do it. I want to taste that, please.
Oh yeah, go ahead and I think it'd be fun to try.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. If I can keep myself from burping.
So there's some Old Elephant Foot. And I think another thing to talk about with hops and bitterness is you have like your calculated bitterness, you have your perceived bitterness, and they're not always the same thing.
Not at all. Yeah.
Actually, the IBUs on the Coralhead are just a hair higher than Elephant Foot.
Yeah.
But you won't realize it because when you drink Old Elephant Foot with the Centennial and Cascade hops, you get some more kind of pine and citrus, which can kind of make the bitterness kind of more stand out. Whereas when you drink Coralhead, it's especially with the big dry hop, you're getting all the aroma and flavor in it. It kind of makes the bitterness seem lower. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I just drank one of these last night, so I love this beer.
And we also, of course, have Reef Donkeys or Pale Ale.
Okay.
And
where did I leave my water? My water. All right, we're going to go without water.
One thing that's fun for me being at Tampa Bay Brewing Company is it's the first brewery I worked at where the owner is actually a brewer. And Dave, he's one that came up with Reef Donkey, Pale Probably
Which won
Alpha
a
Foot too. And
silver medal in 17 or
they've
somewhere back there.
won a lot of medals over the
Yeah,
years.
but I mean at GABF it won a
Oh yeah.
silver, I believe.
So yeah, it's kind of cool having a boss that's actually a brewer. So we can talk about brewing techniques, and he understands it. And he made these beers. He made the brewery what it is. He was the only brewer for so long.
I think this is more balanced, I guess people might say. It's not as...
Another thing that was important when we developed Coral Head, Reef Donkey has a really big Citra dry hop. I didn't want to make just a stronger Reef Donkey.
Right.
I really want it to stand out. So that's why we didn't really want the Citra taking like a forefront on that beer. It's
Right.
definitely like contributing, but it's in the background.
I always liked, what was it, Odell's Mercenary, which I think was a DIPA, a lower ABV DIPA that was very high in Citra. And I think that was my first experience with Citra.
Oh, okay.
Not that I can call it out. I'm very envious of, we used to have a guy working with us that could just, he was like a machine. He goes, oh yeah, that's, And he was usually pretty right.
Right.
It always blew my mind.
My first experience with Citra was I was at Deschutes, and we started brewing Fresh Squeezed. That was the most successful new IPA launch that year.
Wow.
And there wasn't enough Citra on Mosaic, so we had to allocate like only so much beer per month. And because they're using whole leaf, whole flower hops, I have whole 210-pound bales cutting into it. You just be scooping hops right into a bucket in your face all day, and those are pretty fun.
Doesn't
brew
happen
days.
down here a lot.
Smell great.
No, it doesn't happen down here a lot. I was at Brutalist, just happened to stop by one day, and they had flown in fresh hops, and the place was just amazing. I was like, oh my God, it smells so good. All right, so what was the goal with the hop? I don't know. I don't want to keep you on this, but I do though, because Hop Silo just blew my mind over and over and over and over. And I mean, you guys made hazy beers, and I can't stand those things. And they were so good and so well made, and they are kind of a weather vane for people. Like there's not a lot of middle ground.
Okay.
And sadly, some places you go, there's just like hazy, 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 sour, sour, hazy, 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 and that's it. The whole menu is just like pretty one-dimensional. But what was the goal of doing that? Because I mean, this is like a multi-year project with 20-something different new beers, and it was just like it was hard to understand how they could. What was the process, and what did you learn? There's a million questions in there that I'm not even qualified to ask.
All right.
That
I don't have a million answers, but I got a couple.
Give them every one of them, because we got all the time in the world to talk about this. Because I think I gotta believe and especially as much as has been changing in the last few years about how much hops to use, when to use them, all these things that people were doing for literally decades are suddenly being put under a microscope, and like I want to talk about thiols, which I'd never heard of until I started researching for this, and find out that nobody really in the industry knew what they were 5 years ago or whatever. And so what was the process, and what did you learn, and I hope what we can pass on, you can pass on to brewers listening, I think would be the main starting point for that for you.
Sure. So the Hop Silo series, it's really like an experimental IPA collab series for us. So we do like 4 a year, and I think the big focus for us is, for us as brewers, it's kind of a chance for us to try some new things out, play around with some stuff. But also it's really fun as a collab series to find out what other people are doing, what worked for them, what didn't, and try some new things out. So it doesn't have to be a hazy IPA series.
No, they weren't all.
I think one of the first ones was a sour IPA with Green Bench, I think. I wasn't here for that. I never had to try it. But We did a cold IPA a couple years ago with Rubens Brewers, my friends there. That was really fun. But yeah, it's mostly turned into a lot of hazies the last few years. So I've learned a lot through that process, though, because the first time I had a hazy IPA, I was still over at Deschutes, and someone brought a heady topper over, and we weren't all that impressed. We're like, so they just didn't filter their beer. What's the big deal?
Right.
Didn't really know anything about like the science behind it.
Right.
So it was actually really cool when I started at Tampa Bay Brewing Company. Like I said, it was during Hop Silo 8 was being brewed, and I was using Voss yeast. The grist was pretty complicated, if I remember. We did some different stuff with hopping, and it was a good beer, but it didn't really turn out the way we wanted it to. But what was fun was that was the same week as our Badass Beer Fest. And we have all these breweries in from out of state and some from out of country. So we did it was like 7 or 8 collabs that week between our pilot system and our production brewery. And we might have done one at Ybor or two. All I know is we did like 3 other hazies that same week. And they all had different grain bills, different yeasts, different like dry hopping schedules. And so not only was I learning a lot from the other brewers I was talking to, I was learning a lot, reading a lot about the science behind what makes a good hazy. I was learning about biotransformation. Thiols weren't really part of the discussion yet at that point. Actually, I don't think we even talked about biotransformation yet at that point a whole lot. But we learned a lot about what good for us as far as like the grain bill. Because some people at that point were talking about hazies being like yeast, and that is not what you want in a hazy IPA.
Right.
It's really the proteins from the malt. So we really focus on a mix of oats, flaked and malted oats, wheat. They're full of prolamines. And those are really haze-stable proteins.
Right.
So that's where we're starting.
Well, it's not like I always think of a true Hefeweizen when it should be stored upside down because everything's really not staying in suspension. It's waiting, and so if you're doing it correctly, you put that in your cooler a few days ahead of time.
Right.
And a hazy, it shouldn't get into a colloidal thing where everything just starts clumping together and falling out.
Because, our hazies are pretty...
There's a lot of science to that, just keeping things in suspension.
Those are pretty stable. This was canned in November, and I didn't stir it up or anything. That's that's how it pours.
Yeah.
I've grabbed some of our hazy beers from, like, a gas station somewhere, like, 3 months later. It doesn't smell or taste good anymore. It's past its best by date, but it just pours perfectly.
Yeah. Because that was a hard thing for us at the place I came from. Everything just kept falling out. And
you shouldn't, I'm not saying it'll never happen, but I don't really get it in our beers where you're pouring it and it's clear, and then a big blob at the end.
Well, at the end, it should, but it's also, if it takes, that's also past the time it should have been drank anyway, so.
Right.
So,
good hazy for us starts with the grain bill and getting those proteins in there. And then there's certain yeasts that are haze positive and some aren't. And I attended a session at Craft Brewers Conference last year about that from Omega Yeast. And it was a good presentation, but the funny thing was they didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
They're like, they said, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, I kind of like that because I went to one seminar while I was up, and I really respected the fact that they said, we know this much, but this is what we don't know.
Right.
But,
so we start there, and there's certain yeasts that we find work really well for us. And then one thing interesting about Omega's presentation was they're finding if you're dry hopping, like at Knockout, or day 1 or day 2, is actually removing haze from the beer. Most of our hazies, we're doing like a day 3 dry hop. And then we will go back and do a late dry hop after our first acetal test, and we'll drop yeast, do that second dry hop, give it a few days, then crash, and then centrifuge it. So we've kind of figured out what we like to do in a hazy, but we still like to play around with different, advanced hop products and different ingredients. But another big game changer for us was, I think it was hop silo 19. I remember we used Talus. It was a experimental 692 at that time, with I think it was Idaho 7, Azaka, I forget. But I love that hop and that beer in the whirlpool. And we actually pre-chill our whirlpool to minimize IBU pickup because we just want juicy. Haze. We don't want like a real big bitter.
Yeah.
That's one thing that makes New England IPA so different than West Coast, right? So I learned later when I started learning about biotransformation that hop has the highest level of geraniol of any hop they've bred before.
Of what?
Geraniol.
Geraniol.
So you get like that flower, rose.
Maybe everybody else already knows, but I would love to know.
So that kind of like floral kind of rose like aroma. But biotransformation will convert that to citronellol, or citrus.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that makes sense. And that Talus gets me really big, bright grapefruit. So then it was really cool. We were finding certain hops that we used, whirlpool or early dry hop, and then we think what sounds like it'd be good for the late dry hop. Well, when Yakima Chief came out with some really good science and presentations on survivable hop compounds, and they had charts of hops, different varieties have higher levels of survivability. So what do you want to use in the front end of your brewing that those hop compounds are going to carry over to the end? Other ones, they don't survive very well, so they're better to use for dry hopping. So also we learned about hops that are high in biotransformation precursors, and then same thing with thiols. Hops that have high levels of thiol precursors, hops have high levels of free thiols. So when we're doing a hazy IPA, we're not just thinking, part of it is just we drink a lot of beer and we smell a lot of hops and we know ones we like and what we think will work well together, but we're also looking at the analytics of what's going to do really well on the front end of the beer that has high survivability and or high levels of precursors, and then what hops will go best on the dry hop that have high levels of free aroma compounds or free thiols. And then we're trying to kind of predict what that biotransformation is going to do so that when we dry hop, it really complements.
Right.
So that's a lot of what we do with our hazies.
But this is helping you spend your money in the right place, too, because you're not wasting, you're not burning up something. And, I just put X hundreds of dollars worth of stuff in here, and it didn't make it to the end. So, it's also kind of an economic thing.
Our hazies are not
cheap.
No, now if I was trying to save money, I would not do an early dry hop.
Right.
Then I could collect that yeast and repitch it.
Right. Oh, well,
it's not our house. It's not our house strain. So every time I'm brewing a hazy, I have to buy fresh yeast.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you're shipping that overnight, so it's a lot of money just for yeast.
Yeah.
And then we're using about 5 pounds of hops per barrel in our hazies. Elephant Foot is about 2.5. Coral Head's 3 pounds per barrel. That's pretty normal for West Coast IPAs. But for our hazies, we're doing like 5 pounds.
Right.
Another thing that I think is really important for the quality of our hazies is we have a centrifuge. So I'm putting all those hops in, but then I'm pulling them back out.
Yeah.
So I don't really like hop burn. I get some great hazy IPA that it smells good. I'm drinking it. About halfway through, it starts to coat my throat and tongue.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan.
It's almost like fusel alcohol is just drained down the back of your throat.
And then this last year, I don't know if it's BJCP or World Beer Cup, but they started identifying hop burn as a
defect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I agree with.
That was the one seminar I went to.
Oh, okay.
The hop creep. It was a hop creep seminar at CBC.
So if you're making a hazy and you don't have a centrifuge, I think you got to be mindful of where you're using your hops and how much, so that you're not getting, that hop.
You guys had to be one of the first in the area to get a centrifuge. You've had it for a number of years now, haven't you?
Yeah, we had a DE. We still have a DE filter. So if you want a good deal on a DE filter, give me a call. I'd just basically haul it away. Bring me some tacos, man. We'll do a trade.
We're good, right? Yeah.
No, centrifuge I think is really important because for one thing, once you're getting cans out in the market, you want good stable beer. So centrifuge, it's helping us, you're kind of increasing your yield a little bit.
Definitely.
You're creating more consistent quality beer, but also I think it strips out less of the aroma compounds than like filtering would. So I'm a big fan of centrifuges over
I think that
filtering.
makes a lot of sense because those things are going to be more in a type of suspension that can't be spun out, as opposed to things that have started to flocculate, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
All right, so now this
That's
brings
Hop
up,
Silo 20.
Yeah.
And, it's
and it brings
getting a
up
little long in the
Phantasm.
tooth.
I'm
Yeah,
seeing Phantasm here.
Yeah, we've been doing lots of
And
Phantasm.
what?
lately.
This is like a huge thing going on. I Googled, learned a little bit, but that's all I know is what So what is it? How do you use it? How do you guys use it? Go through the whole thing. If you
Yeah.
don't, be fearless.
Okay. Well, so Phantasm, it's basically dried wine or grape skins from
Right?
like New
No,
Zealand.
that's exactly, yeah.
It's a thiol enhancer, so
Okay.
it doesn't replace hops. So I'm not removing poundage of hops, replacing it with Phantasm, but it's to enhance the thiols in the beer. We definitely learned a lot about biotransformation through the Hop Silo series, and thiols
Right.
are the new thing.
They are.
So Phantasm is one ingredient we've been playing with. There's also just certain hops that are really high in free thiols. Like Sabro is really easy hop to use if you want to get a lot of thiols in your finished beer. There's other ones that are high in precursors. The other new thing is thiolized yeast.
That's the other thing I
And-
had on my list to ask you about.
Yeah,
because
so
that's-
let's get into that
because
too.
all of these things kind of work together
Right.
in a interesting way. So lay it on us.
So Omega is really leading the charge on that, and with gently modified yeast.
Okay.
They have a couple different strains, and we've been playing around with them a little bit, but mostly Doug down at our Ybor brewery's been playing around with it. And then yesterday, me, him, and Ben, our lead brewer, we're working on a collab with Boner Branch out of Ohio, and we're talking about. So there are some hops that have high levels of thiol precursors like Saaz or Cascade that you can use in your mash. And the people I've talked to, when you use this thiolized yeast,
Okay.
you're getting just tons of these thiols, like really big, like passion fruit, guava,
Right.
aroma flavor in the fermenter.
Right.
But then when you dry hop it, it's like the brat material and the hops are actually stripping out the thiols and removing it. And so we're going to kind of play around with making, an IPA, but we're not going to be dry hopping it, which really
Right.
cooks my noodle. I have a hard
Right.
time
Yeah, understanding that. Sure.
being so deep in hops for so long to make an IPA that doesn't have a big, huge dry hop.
Right.
But we're also going to experiment with our regular hazy kind of dry hopping schedule with that yeast too. So I want to play around with both, and
Right.
that's one of the fun things about brewing. I mean, I've been this is like my 19th year brewing, right? Or
Yeah.
18, 19. But I'm still
Absolutely.
learning stuff all
Yeah.
the time,
Yeah.
and that's what's makes it fun.
Well, especially the last, hop creep was always kind of perceived as a thing, but then these hazies really brought it to the forefront.
Right.
And serious research is being done by, degreed biologists, microbiologists or whatever, and at like Oregon State or
Yeah.
UC Davis, different places. And that was one of the things I really loved was like they all had what they knew, but this is what I still have undergrads working on, and I think it's a really cool time to be a brewer because, for hundreds of years there was just like Germany Rheingold or whatever, and there was this way of doing it or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And now and then there was a period where nobody liked what new brewers were doing maybe, but now it's like everybody's like, what's the next thing? What are we doing? And like you're talking about these yeast and that powder kind of need to be used together all the time, or is that necessary or not?
As you said, this is a great time to be a brewer because I don't think any other time in history we've had so many different options for malt, for hops, for yeast, different styles of beer. So
Such a short
great time to
period
be
of time.
creative. So
These things have been happening just in the last 10 years,
Yeah. The caveat on that, though, too, is like I would say when you're asking me questions on it, is there's no one way to do any of it. I can just share what's worked well for us, and that helps somebody out, great. But I think everybody has to try things out for themselves and see what works for them at their brewery, based on their equipment, their processes, their yeast. There's no one way to do it. So when it comes to like thiols, like I said, you have the thiolized yeast, and you could just play around with that on its own. You have Phantasm as an ingredient, as a thiol enhancer. You have hops that have a lot of thiols in them.
Right.
You can just use hops that are high in thiols for your dry hop, or you could be doing stuff with biotransformation and doing early dry hop, late dry hop. There's a lot of different things you can do, a lot of different ways you can do it. But one thing about thiols is there are a lot of we think about like passion fruit and grapefruit. There's some really good aromas. There's some bad ones too. They're sulfur-based aroma compounds.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to go to Yakima Chiefs, they do a sensory experience where they have you dip little strips in some different compounds, and they're, when they open the bottle up, you smell it from across the room, and it's like really,
right.
Beautiful grapefruit or like juicy fruit. Then they get to the end, and it smells like Sasquatch's gym bag. It's like,
right.
Whoa, it's bad.
Right.
So
biotransformation maybe or something. It's really
it's just different
journey.
sulfur-based
right.
Aroma compounds.
Right.
So it's like not every one of them is like 100. Every aroma compound has different thresholds before you're detecting it. Every person has different thresholds for when they smell and taste things. So,
I'm blind to certain things completely.
I think a lot of us are.
Yeah.
And definitely COVID changed my, in addition to having allergies and other things,
right.
it changed things for me a bit. But I think going back to, IPA recipe development, there's a lot of different things you'd be going for. Do you want a dank IPA? Do you want a real tropical?
So where do you start? That's a good question. So when you how do you do that? What's the process that you guys go through to, like, say you're going to do hop silo 22 or 3 or whatever?
21 is coming out next
out
week.
now. Okay.
It's in the bright right now.
Is it going to be a numbered one or?
We're kind of trying to get away from numbers,
Okay.
but it's hard to keep track of which one's
Sure.
which, right?
Sure.
So it's with my friend Nick. I went to brewing school with from Humble Sea. We're using all Southern Hemisphere hops on this one.
Oh, okay. New Zealand, blah, blah, whatever.
So Motueka, Nelson, Galaxy, mostly New Zealand, some Australian hops.
Okay.
So, I think a lot of it just comes to, we start out with what do we want to drink? And what do we want to try that's new? And maybe we have some new advanced hop product we want to try out. Maybe it's a hop oil, maybe it's Incognito, or like the cryo pop blend you mentioned earlier. We used that when it was experimental, and been a big fan of that because it's designed for biotransformation.
Right.
So you use that. We use it a lot in the whirlpool, sometimes in that day 3 dry hop, and it just does amazing things for us.
What is because when you go online and you read about that, it says water soluble, and it's designed, like you just said, for that. Expand on that. What does that really mean to us that are
water soluble?
Well, no, I know what that means, but what did they do differently to that blend, to that? Was it just a selection process, or was there any hybridization, or what led to that being more readily opened up?
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know how to ask that question because I don't know enough.
I think I know you're asking. So how they developed that?
I guess so.
And how's it work?
Yeah.
Well, they
what makes it so different that it's so water soluble and so easily?
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. Is that?
Well, they did a lot of that research, like I said, on survivable hop compounds.
All right. So it sprung out of that research?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they looked a lot at biotransformation, and I'm pretty sure talus is in that blend, just from my experience.
Okay.
I think there's a little Sabro in there, some other stuff too. So basically they, from their research, identified another part of that research that was really helpful was they were able to kind of break down different hop varieties how much of different aromatic compounds are in that hop. So if you have two hops that both have very similar profiles, putting them together is going to create a very complex beer, right?
Right.
So in addition to what has high levels of precursors for biotransformation, what has high levels of free aroma compounds for dry hopping, what also has more complexity, so that, this is research I saw 12 years ago or more. I don't know if it's still valid, but I remember a brewery had a grass chromatograph where they're putting beer in there and just breaking down.
Sure, yeah.
But they also had a little sniffer so that people were smelling it and writing down, when they could perceive or not perceive
Right.
aroma compounds. And in that research, they found when they put more varieties of hops in together, people's perception thresholds dropped. And this is something that's really stuck in my head all through my brewing career since I read that, was that, if you make a smash beer, it's just got the one hop in there.
Yeah.
It has that profile. But when you put different hops in together, you're getting a lot of different things in there. And you might end up smelling and tasting some things that you wouldn't have if there hadn't been other things,
Kind of muddied the water
and
maybe,
together, if that makes
type
sense.
of thing. Yeah,
So I
it's
think
kind of confused our nose.
So that's part of that blend and other things that are done is trying to maximize the precursors for biotransformation, so that you're really getting this really big impact from it. So
Right.
I've been pretty impressed with it. Yeah.
Because you mentioned oils. Do you guys use any? Because when I was at Lagunitas, there was cans of
Like extract. and
Yeah,
stuff?
for the boil. And do you guys ever use that?
We don't, but we probably should for bittering, because
Yeah,
you will get better
exactly.
yield.
Yeah.
I think part of it is we always want to try new things and we want to modernize. But also there's a certain amount of keep things consistent and not change them.
Right.
So something like Elephant Foot would be a great beer for me to use bittering extract in the kettle for.
Sure.
But I'm using Centennial and Cascade, and they're pretty affordable hops really in comparison to
Right.
Strata and some other stuff I'm using. So I don't feel like I might get some higher yield. I just don't really feel like playing around with it too much.
Gotcha.
But it would make sense
Well,
from
I
an
think
efficiency standpoint.
Well, yeah, I think and I think it made they can just buy it and sit on it, and they didn't have to worry about.
Well, they have new
getting
things now
their
too,
hands.
like Hop Center has Salvo. It's supposed to give you all the aroma without the bitterness. Doug's going to do a trial with some of that at
What
Ybor.
is it?
Salvo.
Salvo.
And I haven't really played around with it much, so I can't do a
Right.
commercial on it. But,
But it's a bittering hop.
no, it's actually for aroma, like the Whirlpool.
Okay.
So it doesn't add bittering.
Okay.
So
right.
yeah, you can get a hop extract for bittering, or you can get, and then Haas has like Incognito, and Spectrum, and then all the brokers have like a cryo. So Yakima Chief has their cryo hops, Crosby has their CGX, Haas has Lupomax.
Right.
So a lot of them have these concentrated pellets.
Yeah. Well, it's a process. It's not so much just a name.
It's a process, yeah.
Yeah,
So they're
so-
basically.
But they're highly secretive about their blend.
Well, a lot of them are a single variety, though. You
Oh,
can
are
get,
they?
Yeah, you can just get like Citra
Right.
or Mosaic.
So they're just processing.
Yeah, they are basically
materials
removing a lot of the
differently.
vegetal material and giving you a more concentrated hop.
Right. Okay.
So that you can get a maximum impact and more yield. Because when you dry hop real heavily, you end up losing some beer. But I found that some of them don't give me the same sensory as when I use just regular T90 pellets.
Okay.
So for me, when we're trialing these products, like sensory is always the most important thing. Especially if I was going to do something with Elephant Foot or Reef Donkey or an existing beer, I don't want to do anything that's going to ruin the sensory of it or change it.
Right.
Even if it improves efficiency,
Yeah.
we make a few big bucks off it, whatever, it's not worth it.
Right.
I don't really care about that. I want to, if it makes the beer more consistent or have better quality, then I'm interested in it.
Sure.
So if it, like I said, with Elephant Foot, when we started contracting those hops and selecting the lots, for me, the quality and the consistency of that beer increased dramatically. And that was a real simple step to take.
Definitely.
But as far as using other advanced products, I'm always willing to try them out, but I'm not always 100% on changing existing beers with them. I'm more interested in using those. I had to trial them on one-off beers, and that's why hop style is fun, because that is like a playground for me where I can take those advanced hop products that I want to try, and we can use them,
Right.
and I can see their impact without doing anything that's going to change an existing beer that
Was it Yakima that made, what is it, the something 586?
So that's HBC, is the Hop
That's-
Breeding Council 586.
Yeah.
That's a joint venture with Yakima Chief and Haas.
And Haas together. Because that thing blew my mind, man.
Yeah, I love the bright
That's-
mango in that.
That's an amazing. They had basically a smash beer at their booth, and I was in danger of like wearing out my welcome on that.
Oh, okay.
Because it was like, that's a stunning.
Yeah, we use a lot of that in Hop Style 19. That was a collab with our friends at Bellbreaker.
Right.
And Bellbreaker is a hop growing family, Loftus Ranches in Yakima, and they built their. It's one of the brothers, I think, runs the farm. The other brother and sister and their spouses started the brewery, and I've been drinking their beer for a long time.
So it's farm
back
to
home.
table brewery.
Yeah, it's right there.
It's-
So
it's pretty cool.
We did that collab with
Yeah.
them, and we really featured 586.
Yeah.
And then when I was out for hop selection, I got to do a return collab with them, and we use all fresh hops and made that same beer, and that was a lot of fun.
Because when I was at the booth and I was talking to him, and I don't know how, what they're telling somebody that just walks up to a table, but they were like, well, we really don't know what this is. He was just playing around. We don't really. He made some hybridizations, and, they were like playing it off like they had no freaking clue what this was. And I was like, maybe it's true. I don't know. It was like mystery, the mystery of 586. But I just remember it blowing my mind. It's one of the few things I've had recently that really, stood me up and was like, oh my God, what is that? That's because I really do love hoppy beers, and I don't know anything about it that I wish I did, but I know what I like. It's like art, no, but I know what I like, and like Reef Donkey, go-to beer wherever I go. If I go somewhere and it's not on tap, I'm like that's like, it's kind of like in the old putting Stella on or something else. You come into a place, you don't know what you want. It's busy. There's a pressure to order, and you look up and you see something like Stella or Guinness or this or that you're like, okay, I'll take that just to get out of the way without, holding up the line. And Reef Donkey does that for me. I go to a place, I see that, I'm like, I can go to that. I know it's fresh because I'm living next door. But I think Dave was telling me one time that he's got one customer that's been drinking Reef Donkey or something since the beginning. Was it him? I don't know. Maybe it was somebody else telling me.
I wish he was here to tell the story.
Yeah, because it was like,
Excuse me.
if I make a change to this beer, maybe it wasn't David, but if I make a change to this beer, I always go to this guy because he comes in every day, he gets one, and if anybody knows that beer changed, this one person on the planet,
Right.
like, because that's all he drinks, and you're not gonna, slip anything by him.
Reef Donkey does really well because it's a pale ale. It's 5.5%. It's very
It is.
sessionable.
It is.
But it's really modern hops, Motueka, Equinaut, and Citra. So it's really hop forward if you're a hop head and you like an IPA.
Yeah.
But you want to be able to have a few. And of course, it's hot in Florida. So
And it's not
really
as
good.
astringent, and I like things very dry. I'm not saying I don't like some astringentness, but it's not like there are some sessionable IPAs that are just so thin and too dry,
Right.
and your tongue just gets rough, and it's not pleasurable.
Right.
It doesn't. It just doesn't give you. I want the same experience, but just give me that 2% less alcohol
Well,
because it makes such a huge difference.
so Reef isn't necessarily a session IPA. But
No.
It kind of drinks like one.
Yeah, but it's a pale ale.
I brought you Day Donkey today.
Yeah,
We canned that today.
That's what I want.
And that's supposed to be kind of like a session.
right.
So it's basically based off of Reef Donkey with got the same hops, but we also threw some Pacific Sunrise in there, which is a New Zealand hop.
So pale lager, are you using a hybrid yeast or a lager yeast?
Lager yeast,
Okay.
and we gave it it's been we brewed that back in beginning of January. So we gave it 4 weeks lagering time after
Sure.
fermentation was done, and
Right.
we brewed it last year for the first time, and no dry hop, big Whirlpool edition. It got bronze at Great American Beer Festival in the other hoppy lager category.
Right.
And we're really known for our hop forward beers. We're not really known for our lagers, so that was kind of fun. And this year, I threw a real light Citra dry hop in it, just to make it kind of, like I said, more kind of consistent with Reef Donkey, but definitely it's still a lager.
You got what's his name's glasses on there.
Yeah, we got some Pit Vipers on there.
What's his name in your brew house that always wears these glasses?
Well, I got some Pit Vipers.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And I got
Hell yeah.
I got Dave a pair.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And then we did a trade with Pit Viper. We sent them some
cool.
beer, and they sent some
Awesome.
glasses back.
That's awesome.
And I was actually back home in Washington one year for a craft brewers conference, but my whole crew was wearing Pit Vipers in there, and
Well, I mean, if you did it blindfolded, you'd know right away that's a lager. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
we do a lawn daddy every year for Father's Day, and that's pretty much the same traditional grist and yeast as a German Pilsner, but we like to play around with the hops. So we
Right.
use Contessa, like it's a American kind of noble hop. We like to play around. We made a bunch of different lagers where we like to do a traditional grain bill, traditional yeast,
Right.
but we'll use either a new American hop or a new European aroma hop from Czech or Germany or something. So we like to play around with it.
Well, I mean, that's big now, right now. I mean, the Pilsners are just coming out of the woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
But you did, what was it, the Beviamo?
Beviamo's Italian Pilsner.
Yeah, that was
We call that with
delicious.
Grand Central. Yeah,
I come by for lunch, man. That's what
Saphir. Yeah.
cup of chili and a Beviamo was
Mm-hmm.
delicious together.
Yeah, so we like to. There's a lot of guys making really great, traditional lagers. We think it's kind of fun to do something a little different.
Sure.
If I'm going to charge you craft beer prices to drink a Pilsner,
Yeah.
as a brewer, I think it's fun for me to try some new things out and kind of make some tweaks. And like I said, we don't have to follow our Heiskebot, so we can
Right.
do whatever we want.
Sure.
And then I hope it's fun for consumers to kind of be able to try a little twist on something traditional, but make it a little unique and maybe a little more American.
No, I agree. I hope they are trying because you guys are. You're known for being this way, but like we said earlier, that Goza that was on that one day I stopped in was delicious. It was perfect.
We do a lot of fruit sours and stuff too. So
Yeah.
we have a new seasonal. Citrus Grove is our new spring seasonal. It's a 6% golden ale with orange and tangerine puree.
Okay.
And it's so it's very Florida citrus for the
So it's
season.
a nice summer.
Yeah, and then we just
Crushable.
released for Valentine's Day every year we do strawberry cheesecake. This is an 8% kettle sour. This one turned out amazing this year. I changed my fruit
I
suppliers.
don't think I've ever had that because
And
I avoid sours for the most part because they're just so often it's just
we're gonna give this a go.
yeah, definitely. Thank you. Oh, the
You're not
color is
driving, right?
beautiful.
So a lot of strawberry puree, strawberry concentrate, some cheesecake, and a little graham cracker vanilla in there. And like I said, I changed my fruit
Oh,
suppliers.
that's more like it.
And the strawberry just really punched through this year. Just carries over.
Yeah,
It's super
which is hard
juicy.
to do, man. I've seen people
jammy.
put pounds of strawberries in it; it just disappears.
Right.
It's a strange.
And it's funny because, like I said earlier, I love having our centrifuge, and I think it helps our consistency and quality. One area where it puts me back a bit is there's so many breweries adding fruit post-fermentation. I think a lot of people are really expecting all this fruit, and we're adding our fruit in the fermenter. We're doing force ferments in our lab before we centrifuge it. We're making sure that that yeast has eaten all the sugar it's going to eat.
Sure.
The centrifuge removes some of the fruit. So I have to use a lot of fruit in the fermenter for it to carry through to the end like that. And there's no fruit extracts in that at all. It's just puree, concentrate.
And it's not stupid sour. It's not. It's like
there's a little bit of lactose in there. We don't add a ton of lactose, but I
Right.
do find that a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely helps with
Well,
the
I mean, it's not
residual
super tart,
sweetness,
I
body,
should say.
mouthfeel. Yeah.
because somebody squared me up on that a long time ago. That was like tart as lemon, sour as milk, and I was like, oh,
Okay.
that makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying I can still taste the difference all the time, but
We do
this
sour.
is not over the top though. It's not
Yeah.
making me feel like I just put a juice head or whatever in my mouth, and I'm
We're definitely looking to create like a balanced, complex beer. Mm-hmm. Now, not all our sours have lactose, but if it says pastry, or if we're trying to make a dessert beer,
Right, you put a little
there's
lactose
probably some
in.
lactose in there.
Right.
But I know there's a lot of people who are lactose intolerant, so
Yeah.
we also like to make beers that don't have lactose. So you get that real clean, crisp, lactic.
adds a nice mouthfeel.
sour.
That contributes to mouthfeel?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing all kinds of different stuff. A lot of times that we are on the floor and we are having a really healthy dialogue
Yeah.
about what we want to do with the beer. And I think talking about balance, coming from Pacific Northwest, really different beer market than down here. So I've had to adapt a lot, and my team kind of talks about Florida, and they say if it's on the can, it's got to just punch in the mouth kind of.
Exactly.
And I'm like, well, there's some things I think should be in the background when it comes to spices, and there's certain flavors that if it wasn't there, something was missing. But when you add it, it's there in the background, and it's contributing, but it doesn't have to, take over.
Right.
So like the strawberry cheesecake, when I use fruit, like I want the fruit to really come through, and I really want you to taste that. You taste the cheesecake, but it's pretty subtle, because like cheesecake could be a weird flavor. I don't want to taste like strawberries and like feet or something weird.
Right.
And you get a little bit of graham cracker, a little bit of vanilla, but it's all kind of in balance. And we have our Ebor Brew Pub where Doug is doing a lot of one-off beers, experimental beers. We do trials and stuff down there. I also have a pilot system. They're brewing on it today at our West Chase production facility. And I kind of let the guys on that do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do something, and there's time.
Right.
I don't dictate to them. I mean, rarely do I'm like, hey, we got to make this.
Right.
But they feel like doing something, I'm like, just go for it.
Yeah.
Because I also know when you're doing production brewing, and they're making Reef Donkey,
Yeah.
you're doing like
It's
10
a soul
turns a
crushing
week.
thing, yeah. It can be soul crushing.
Well, it gets
repetition
redundant.
in your
It gets,
job.
Yeah,
repetition in any job is
we get into this industry because we love beer and we love the process, and we get excited about new ingredients and trying new things out. And so when you get to where you're kind of just doing the same thing every day, it can get kind of repetitive. I always found a way to get engaged as far as like really master. Every brew house is different, so really master the process and take a lot of pride in that. But even then, you need a creative outlet. So
Right.
I don't want my guys to get burnt out. I want them to feel like their voice matters. I also want them to feel like they can try new things.
Yeah.
And we also last year created a pub rotation. So yeah, the packaging team, they don't get the brew, but they got to take turns. I'm going to keep doing it again this year, going down to our Ebor Brew Pub, working with Doug on a recipe, come back on brew day, go back package it. We got some.
That's awesome.
Got some great beer out of it.
Yeah.
And also, the team had a great time doing it. So
Right.
really try and keep our creativity going. So a lot of what we do is cranking out Reef Donkey, Elephant Foot. Now Coral Head is really
It really is
ramping
delicious.
up.
It's delicious.
It hasn't even released yet, and I keep our pre-orders on it. I've had to keep adding more tanks and more tanks.
Right.
And then we have our seasonals and then our one-offs, like our collaborative series. But I want the whole team to always feel like, they get a chance to do some creative stuff too, so they don't get burnt out.
Well, the other day, I was talking to some people, and it was like trying to create an environment where failure isn't a deal breaker. Don't be afraid, because if you're not given room to make mistakes, then you'll tighten down so much that you'll never do anything. I think what you're doing is so important, and I don't think everybody gets it, how important that is, to give people room to make mistakes, get out of the rut, and not feel like they're going to get, slapped down because something didn't go right. Okay, so
Right. Yeah, when that kind of stuff happens, you want to learn from it, right?
Sure.
I think the last few years have been just one challenge after another, right? And it's really helped us grow and develop, because I think our mindset is always, when you said failures, I kind of feel like failure isn't an option in some ways, as far as
Sure.
like we got to find a way forward.
Yeah.
As craft brewers, we have to deal a lot with equipment breaks down. Something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Someone makes a mistake. You can't just give up. You got to figure out what to do.
Well, somebody told me a long time ago that was the real art of being the head brewer. Was
Right.
everything until everything's easy as long as it's flowing.
Yeah,
But
right.
when the shit hits the fan, that's when it really, like, how do you fix this?
Well, the focus is first of all, what's the issue?
Yeah.
How do we resolve it? The last thing is like, who did what?
Sure.
When you have a fear-based environment where the first thing is who did what,
Yeah.
people are going to hide things or keep it under.
Yeah.
I can't afford that. I can't have people saying, I didn't do something, or I did something wrong,
No.
and then not tell me.
Yeah.
Because I'm putting beer out someone's going to drink, Like I said, I really try to have a collaborative environment, because I want everyone to feel like, when we win a medal, it's not just the brewers, the cellarman who transferred it and harvested yeast, and the packaging team that put it in the can, and everyone had a hand in it.
100%.
So we all get to share that victory together.
Yeah.
And it's not that person's beer or my beer or her beer. It's all our beer. So we really try to have that kind of environment where we're all in it together. So we all win together. I've learned a lot of different things along the way.
Yeah. Wrong things, right things.
Positive. Yeah, it's a hard transition from production to leadership. For sure, I've had to learn a lot. I'm still learning. But having done production brewing for so long, I know what it feels like to be in those different work environments.
Yeah.
So,
Slave to the schedule and.
yeah, and like I said, I don't want it to be something where everyone has to be afraid to say they messed up.
Yeah.
I had a guy dry hop the wrong tank one time, and we're like, well, it's not the same beer, so we can't put it out, but it's not bad, so we'll just call it something else, and
Exactly.
we'll pour it at the pub, and
Exactly.
you got to find a way forward.
Yeah.
The last year has been so many challenges with supply chain issues and everything else. So, the way you get stronger is defeating like a more powerful opponent. You don't get stronger
Yeah.
playing chess, right?
You play to the level of your competition.
So every new challenge comes up, it's
Yeah.
just a way for us to get stronger. So we have a supply chain issue. It's like, well, how do I resolve that? What do I have as a plan B, as a backup? How do I track our costs, and how do I find ways to improve them? Like, what can we do about our quality and our consistency? What kind of cross training do we have to do? Do we need different equipment? I think before I came on board, there was, I don't know for sure what it was like, because, but I know I'm a big believer in having backup parts for everything.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year where we get busy. One of the worst things is someone saying, "Hey, this broke," and
We ain't got one.
we don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
We don't know where to get it.
Yes.
And during COVID, it's really hard to get stuff timely. So anytime they would, order that one part, I'm like, get two or get three.
Yes.
And I don't care what it costs. That's cheaper than us all being shut down for a day.
Exactly. And then paying overnight fees. Thanks so much to Anthony Stone from Tampa Bay Brewing Company, one of my favorites in the area, one of the oldest in the area, the oldest in the state. and
Not
makers.
one of, not the oldest.
No, one of. I did. Did I say one of?
I
I hope I said one of.
But I don't want to be known as one of the oldest breweries. That's not fun, you know.
I
We
don't
want to
know.
really be known for being one of the most hot forward,
That's
innovative,
true. That's
creative, best drinking breweries. That's you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I mean, that's why I wanted you here, was because Hop Silo series has crushed me.
Awesome.
And everybody I talk to, you know, like I wouldn't take my word for it. I'm kind of not much more than a consumer, which I feel has certain advantages in my case. But everybody I've talked to about it, a lot of them in the industry, I think they all realize what a huge project that was, and they all know that they have an idea of what it takes to just make one new beer or 3 new beers, but to do 4 every year, 20 something of them, and all of them, you know, maybe this one was not to your liking as much as some of the others, but they were all defect free. They were all, you know, very interesting stuff. So anyway,
Ready to get some tacos or what?
yeah, let's get some
go.
tacos. I hope everybody got a little bit out of this, and take care until next time. Thank you so much.